in that regard. But
yeah. All right, well, mate, look, take us through the Collingwood game, if you will, Collingwood GWS game, an absolute 1 point. Would you call it a thriller? I don't know.
Oh yeah. I mean, it can be the lowest scoring game of all time, but if it's tight, then it can end in a million different possible ways. And look, to Collingwood's great credit, they shut the game down incredibly well with that minute to go, just playing rugby scrum after rugby scrum. They did a really, really good job of that. But the net result, 8-10, 58 to 8-9, 57, Collingwood's favour. 2 to McStay, won't be playing next week. 1 to both Myercheck and Jamie Elliott, with 34 disposals to Geordie De Goey, who was, in my mind, absolutely the best player, at least for the Pies, but arguably on ground. And baffling that they just could not find a way to get him on the field for those final 8 minutes of the game, I think it was in the end, roughly. Nick Dacos with 28 kind of flatters him a little bit because his disposal was pretty off. He looked pretty rusty, but he'll obviously be better off for the run. Scotty Pendlebury just doing what Scotty Pendlebury does, 25 disposals there, and just class and poise, especially when things got really heated. He was always the cool head. Massive credit to him. Whilst for the Giants, Toby Green with 2, probably should have been 5 for the number of head-high things he wasn't given, especially later in the game. But anyway, more on that soon, I'm sure. Brown with 1, Lloyd with 1, and then 34 disposals to Kelly, Tom Green with 31, and Lockie Whitfield with 26, and a few near decapitations because the Pies were going after him real early on.
Weren't they? It was a strange game. With the way the umpires were calling it, and a lot of conspiracy theorists out there thinking it's all about getting Collingwood into that grand final. Now, someone who was at the game, Paul, is with us now, and I believe she's got a furry friend with her as well. I'm just going to bring her in. Rach, welcome to... Rach is a regular on this show. Can we call her a regular now? Welcome, Rach.
Long-time listener, third-time caller.
Third time. And I always get this wrong. Is it Patch or Paish?
This is Gizmo, so it's neither. Gizmo is actually he's our resident GWS supporter, so he's not really keen on hanging out. He's very keen to leave. But Paish is a Gold Coast supporter, so she's actually out celebrating the VFL win from today.
I was going to say, because you've come from Icon Park today, am I right? And you've been sampling the hot dogs on offer there, and you're not too pleased. I saw on the socials that I think Mummy Dearest might have paid for your hot dog, but yeah, not great.
Oh, I was very disappointed. It was stale, it was cold, and it was $8. I cannot justify $8 on a football hot dog. No. Apparently I can if my mum's paying. So yeah, it was a big day of sun and brews, and unfortunately the local boys didn't get up, but it was good to see Charlie Constable get to have his premiership. Yes. That was nice. But yeah, big day.
Pretty typical of all things coming out of Icon Park at the moment, really. Yeah, disappointing.
Pretty much, yeah.
We'll get to the Carlton game, but you were at the MCG, am I right, Rach, on Friday night to watch Collingwood and GWS wearing your colours and as much orange as you could fit on. Take us through it. Now, you went on the march? Is that right?
Yeah, so I went on the Tsunami March from the Coopers Inn, which was just such a fantastic experience, and it made me a little bit jealous that sort of we didn't get around that sort of stuff last year. I know it's been done a few times this year, but it was a really welcoming environment, and the vibes were really good. There was no negativity or anything like that. Even when Collingwood supporters would come past, it was all love. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun.
Good.
Good. You had 100,000 people there. What was the ratio like? I mean, on the TV, it was clearly Collingwood, it felt like about 95,000 Collingwood, but at the ground, did it feel that way?
So myself and Burgerslaw from Twitter, we bought GWS memberships during the week. They had a special finals membership. And we were just kind of like, wouldn't it be funny if we bought these? And wouldn't that be silly? And then it just kind of turned into a little bit of the joke went a bit too far, and we were members, and then we were actually sitting in the GWS members bay. So the vibes around us were immaculate, but towards the end of the game, the Collingwood chant you couldn't avoid it regardless of who was around you. It was very loud.
Which in typical Collingwood supporter fashion is kind of ridiculous considering how close it was. Like they could have blown it at any point in the last couple of minutes there, and yet they're still bellowing like they do. It's only a shame that they weren't playing against us, really, because they have a great knack of going too early on the crow when it comes to that song against the Cats and then pissing the game away, really. So,
well, it used to be, I feel like it used to be their thing of when they knew that the game was won. That was kind of like their gold jacket. They do it after every goal now. It's just they do it whenever. And it's like, it's power to them. There was a lot of them there.
You're insufferable.
Just like making noises and it's weird. It's their thing. Good on them.
Yeah, and I know that, all supporter bases have their good people and their bad apples, but the hostility as we were leaving the ground was palpable. It was I wouldn't say I felt scared, but I felt very uncomfortable. Had a lot of people yelling abuse at me and things like that, and it just took me back to last year when Geelong very comfortably beat Brisbane. The last thing on my mind was getting into anyone's face. And I've never had an environment like that where it's been so negative for no reason. But yeah.
You don't kick them when they're down. Like you lost by a point. I mean, it's like when we, you said beat Brisbane and beat Sydney. Like, you beat a team by 10 goals or more, or you beat them by a point. I mean, they're hurting for different reasons, but there's no need for it, especially with GWS. Like, I think everyone wants GWS to have some level of success. Maybe not go all the way.
Certainly everyone except the Collingwood supporters did on the weekend. So
yeah. I think the thing that's always been ingrained to me, especially by my mum, is that winning's enough. Winning is winning. That's what you want to do. It's not about who loses. It's not about who you beat. Sorry, my cat's just chewing my desk. It's not about who you beat. Winning's winning, and winning is enough. So.
Yeah. What did you think about? While you're dealing with the cat at your ankles there? What did you think about some of the umpiring decisions from? You're in the GWS area, and Paul and I were watching it, and I think a lot of other neutral supporters were watching it, thinking, "Oh my goodness me, GWS are getting the raw end of the stick on this one," or whatever the expression is. But it didn't. Toby Green had his neck ripped off, and there's a lot of other non-decisions paid as well. What was it from your point of view, and the people around you, I suppose?
I don't think it influenced the game, regardless of what should have been called. It was there for GWS to win. But the Toby tax is real. I don't think you can deny that he's done a lot of crappy things for a lot of years, and he's still paying for that. And I don't think, all right. I don't think it should be that way. But that's just kind of what happens. And I think we saw that similar with Jack Ginnivan last year. It's like if you duck for free kicks, when you do get taken high, the umpire is not necessarily going to believe you. I didn't get that. Sorry. I'm a mess. Sorry, I've got everything going on.
No, you're,
we love it.
Look, Toby obviously was the recipient of a few, and he was obviously going to be under some pretty intense pressure all night regardless. I don't know necessarily he paid the Toby tax. I think a lot of there was Connor Iden, for example, who copped it right near the end as well. There was quite a few across the entire game, and I mean, there's been a bit of commentary off the back of both games this weekend of the whole putting the whistle away line of thinking. And look, I'm subscribing to it. I don't usually like agreeing too much with what Kane Corns has to say, but some of his comments around this have been largely, I'm sure there's probably been some embellishment in a few areas as well, but they've been largely on the money because it's this frustrating thing where we've got a set of rules for one circumstance and a set of rules that are not being enforced to the same degree in another. And I get there's anxiety potentially around, well, what if I blow the whistle and I get it wrong? But also, it's the same thing when you're not blowing the whistle. Like there's several scenarios they got wrong. And it's affected both teams at different points. I'm not saying it's all GWS. There were certainly some calls throughout the game that Collingwood should have gotten that didn't as well. GWS just happened to be at fairly influential moments. And there were poor calls in the game last night as well. And the game was pretty well blown out and done by early in the third quarter, I would say, despite Carlton giving it a little bit of a mini crack again at the end. I don't like the whole differential in standards when it comes to the standard season versus the finals itself, because it makes it impossible to predict. It makes it an impossible job for the umpires, and it's already an incredibly hard job to then have a different set of standards that we're working to, and the scrutiny that then comes from it is it's insane to me. Just stick to your guns the way you've been doing it all year, because at least everyone knows exactly what to expect.
And isn't that the reason why we brought in an extra umpire in the first place? Like,
Yeah,
there's 4
fair enough.
umpires on the ground. I don't believe that none of them saw a lot of what was going on.
I mean,
I think
it's part of the rationale. Obviously, that getting the right call was a big part of it. But as I learnt from chatting to Razor when he was on Behind the Play a few weeks back, it was also about kind of umpire preservation as well, with the number of kilometres and intense high level running they were having to do. Having a fourth to be able to share the load was obviously a big part of it too. But certainly in terms of having correct calls, it should improve that. And yet we see evidence from time to time that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Rachel? You may not have noticed this live, but maybe in the wash up, the Nick Dacos tackle, I think on Brett Daniels might have put him into. Well, no, he didn't KO him, but the the people behind the camera decided that he needed to go off and have a concussion test or head injury assessment or whatever they call it, and couldn't get back on the ground at the end. And I don't know if that impacted on the game too much, because he's generally one of their better players. He's probably one of those guys. You say Brett Daniels, who's Brett Daniels? Never heard of him, but he's had a great final series, and
he's a gun.
Him not to be able to get on, along with clearly DeGoey, but for different reasons. I don't know if I don't know if it was the right decision or wrong decision, but it doesn't really sit comfortably with someone who's not at the ground making those calls from a studio somewhere. It's weird.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and you'll never know sort of what impact it would have had on the game. I'm someone who takes that sort of stuff very seriously. So I think if there is an inkling of doubt, I think that someone's brain is more important than a football game.
100%.
Agreed.
Yeah. Just,
I
don't know if they got it exactly right, but yeah.
We'll go on.
Yeah, they might just have to make a couple of tweaks here and there, but I completely agree. And I'm probably one of those people that says maybe don't have club doctors, but anyway, that's probably a whole other conversation. Rach, really appreciate you coming on the show. We'll have to get you back for a 4th episode at some point. I was really hoping GWS would get up, because Paul just loves the song. He loves the big sound, and
we're gonna do it anyway. We've got to.
I was.
There's a big sound from the west.
That'll do.
Oh, no.
I can't play the whole thing because they didn't win. So, Paul, you got your little taster there. Rach, sincere, thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And we hope to get you back again soon sometime.
Thanks so much for having me, fellas. Have a good rest of the show.
Will do. Take care.
See you, Rach.
Paul, any other thoughts on the Collingwood GWS game? I mean, yeah.
Look, I guess following up on your Dacos and Brett Daniels, like I'm glad Dacos is not facing scrutiny for the whole thing, and I'm glad it kind of got tossed out, because look, he drove him in the back, and it should absolutely be an in the back free kick, and I think that was a mistake on the umpire's part. But in terms of suspension, the only reason he's there for a scat test in the first place was because he couldn't protect himself, couldn't brace his fall, and that wasn't because of what Dacos did. It's because Pendlebury totally independently grabbed his arm to try and prevent a handball. And so you combine the two events, and he kind of ate a bit of dirt, and it was an unfortunate result for him. But I certainly don't blame either the Collingwood players in terms of the actual test itself. The umpire made a poor decision in not offering a free kick, but the actual incident. I'm glad Dacos is not facing anything for that. His performance overall was pretty mediocre. We need him to get a bit more game time, apparently, for the most likely Brownlow medalist that's going to pop up tomorrow.
Well, who knows who's going to win that one? I will ask you at the end of the show. If I remember, you will remind me, I'm sure. I want to get your thoughts on who's going to finish on the podium in the Brownlow. I think just probably one last thing from me on the game. Toby Green after the game in the rooms, really, really emotional. And I probably looked at the guy a little bit differently. And maybe I'm a bit harsh on Toby over the years, and I think he sort of carries on a little bit too much. And maybe he's turned the corner a little bit, and just the emotion that you could see on his face, and just him, a bit teary, and really hurts. And thankfully, we haven't lost a prelim by a point. We lost that semi-final to Sydney, which I'm sure you remember quite well, but it still burns. But losing by a point in a prelim, could you imagine anything worse?
Yeah, prelim is probably the worst time to taste that feeling. But look, kind of always had a bit of a liking for Toby. I've not necessarily liked some of the acts that he's, whether it's, leaping and kind of sticking the foot out when he's going up. And so some of the behavior was a little bit rubbish. But as a football, and you could see like there was a good core there, and he just needed to find something to. And it looks like just maturity has struck at the right time, and pair that with the leadership of being the captain, and it's been incredible for him. So good luck to the guy as far as I'm concerned. And it was. You don't want to see anyone in that sort of state, but of course there does have to be a winner and a loser, and especially in those sort of circumstances, it's heartbreaking if you're on the losing end, and I don't blame it. It's really good to see that how much it matters.
Yeah, there's no guarantees of getting back there. We'll just look at Geelong. We are a Geelong YouTube channel. We're expecting, a lot of people are expecting Geelong to go back to back, or at least make the grand final, and we weren't within QE of it. So there's no guarantees. Everyone starts next season 0-0, and probably takes no form into it, other than the lessons that you learn from campaigns past.